Welcome to this week's edition of the REIT Leadership Series. I'm your host, Sam Chandan, the Silverstein Chair and Dean of the Schack Institute of Real Estate at the NYU School of Professional Studies. It's my privilege, and it's been my privilege since July when we kicked this off with Sam Zell, to host this weekly series with Adam Emmerich and Robin Panovka, co-chairs of the REIT M&A practice at Wachtell Lipton. Adam and Robin are both also members of the board of the NYU REIT Center, and Robin is a member of the Schack Institute's Board of Advisors as well. Also, Scott Robinson, my dear colleague and friend and the director of NYU's REIT Center, a professor here at the Schack Institute. The series, as I mention every week, has just been amazing. Anne was just mentioning how for all of the challenges and headwinds of the pandemic, we've been able to, in new and unexpected ways, reach each other in ways that we haven't before. And I think the REIT series has been one example of that. If we look at all of the different sessions that we've done since July, we've reached between live and replay, we've reached more than 40,000 people with the series, which is a big accomplishment for us. And just a reminder to everyone out there, although attendance is dominated by industry across our different platforms and replays, the series is open to students no matter where they go to school. It's mission driven for us. We want to make sure that smart, young real estate minds, no matter where they happen to be, have access to this kind of content and can hear from people like Anne. Keep your eyes out. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be announcing a really amazing slate of programs for the spring semester, including the 25th annual REIT Symposium that was postponed from this past August, the continuation of our Capital Markets Leadership Series, a Women in Leadership series as well, and our annual Pride Roundtable for LGBTQ+ members of the industry, students, and allies as well. That's a really important program for us. So if you know of folks in the industry who might want to take advantage of the opportunity to meet with and network with other LGBTQ individuals, please get in touch with my office. We want to make sure that they have that chance. Again, really, I think it's a point of pride for us at Schack that across all of our programs so far this year, about 40% of our speakers have been women. Our goal here and our benchmark for ourselves is that when we think about any dimension of diversity, that our speakers and the leaders that we highlight and profile and speak with should be as representative as our amazingly diverse student body. So we're really appreciative of the time that everyone is committed to make that possible. We still have a ways to go, but we're making, I think we're making good progress. On Thursday of this week, we'll be joined by Craig Solomon, CEO of Square Mile Capital, for our Capital Markets Leadership Series. That, of course, is a lead up to next week's 53rd annual Conference on Capital Markets and Real Estate, which this year is spread over 3 days. A couple of highlights: the 22nd annual Golden Apple panel, which focuses on the outlook for New York City, particularly whether it be real estate, whether it be the potential for the impending fiscal crisis that the city faces or that we face with the transportation system. This panel just being more important really than ever. We'll be joined, as we are every year, by Stephen Ross from Related, Bill Rudin, Wendy Silverstein, Marty Berger, CEO of Silverstein Properties, and Scott Reckler, chairman of RXR, for that panel. Another really key one, Jeff DeBoer, the CEO of the Real Estate Roundtable, will be joining us for the conference to talk about, and if you don't know the Roundtable and Jeff, they do incredibly important work on behalf of the industry and representing us in Washington and in dialogue with the Senate and the White House and Congress. I'll be talking to Jeff about what the real estate industry's priorities are in engaging with the next or returning administration, as we will discover over the next couple of days. Lisa Pendergast, head of CREFC, will be heading up and headlining a special CREFC session. We will continue our ongoing series on the Black experience in real estate, this time with a focus on capital markets and the experience of Black professionals in the real estate industry in raising capital, but as Black professionals, but also specifically with an eye to raising capital for investment in predominantly minority neighborhoods. And we'll be joined by Tammy Jones, CEO of Basis Investment Group, a board member at Crown Castle, and Matt Calley, and the chairwoman or the chair of the Real Estate Executive Council, as well as several others. And hopefully you had a chance to catch our kickoff for the Black Experience Real Estate Series, where we were also joined by Margaret Anadou from Goldman Sachs, by One Payne from Clarion, Jim Simmons from Aslan Capital Partners, and Craig Robinson then at WeWork, and also a board member at Schack. Other quick events that I'll mention that are part of next week's Capital Markets Conference: we have a meetup for early career women in the capital markets. We're doing that as a partnership with Girl Gang, which is just a fantastic group of young women professionals in the real estate industry. If you're attending the conference, please join us for that. We're doing it on Thursday evening. It's going to be a lot of fun. We also have a meetup and roundtable for LGBTQ+ conference attendees. We have over 60 speakers, all of the general sessions of the conference, and all of our affinity group sessions, including the women's meetup and the LGBTQ meetup, are entirely free. So please do join us for that. We really want to see you there. As a final note, please, as every week, use the Q&A feature to enter your questions. Upvote the questions you like. You can now also comment on questions if you want to elaborate on something. Scott will join us again at around 1:15, 1:20 to share audience questions with Anne. It is my great pleasure to introduce Anne Segrest McCulloch, President and CEO of the Housing Partnership Equity Trust. Anne is an icon or a legend or both in the affordable housing space, and quite rightly in June was named chair of the board of governors of the National Housing Conference. I think all of us in the real estate industry are so proud of Anne and the work that she's doing to ensure the availability of the naturally occurring affordable housing supply, but affordable and workforce housing more broadly. She was previously a member of the leadership team at Fannie Mae, overseeing Fannie's work in emerging and multicultural markets and expanding consumer access to sustainable mortgage credit and affordable housing. She's also held positions at Housing and Urban Development, HUD, FDIC, and for old timers like myself and students who've done their reading, you will remember or know of the Resolution Trust Corporation as well, the RTC. So Anne, thank you so much for carving out an hour of your day to join us. We really appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thanks for that introduction.
So first, kick us off by telling us about the Housing Partnership Equity Trust.
Sure. We're a social purpose REIT whose function is to acquire and preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, as well as lightly subsidized affordable housing, in partnership with some of the best-in-class regional and national nonprofit affordable housing owner-operators. We've acquired and preserved over 3,100 units of affordable housing nationwide, really focusing on high opportunity neighborhoods around our big cities.
You know, when you say high opportunity neighborhoods, maybe elaborate on that for a moment. High opportunity in terms of the potential for the affordable housing stock to be lost to market rate investors. You can see where I'm going with this, or
Yes.
high opportunity. How would you describe it?
So everything for us starts with the resident. We're about providing an opportunity for families to succeed. And that means we target buying real estate in neighborhoods that have the things that you need to succeed: access to public transportation, near grocery stores, near good schools, near jobs. So these are neighborhoods where a family can live and succeed and their children can thrive. But they're also the neighborhoods where the real estate is most at risk of going way up market and going from housing that serves the workforce, really families making between 50 and 80% of area median income, to moving upstream to 90%, 120%, 130%. So our goal is to buy properties when the neighborhood's on the way up, but before it's priced out of our reach, and then make the types of investments that maintain the quality of the living experience for our residents without changing the character of the real estate.
Yeah. So as we were discussing before we kicked off, I'd been chatting with a couple of our colleagues in recent weeks from the National Affordable Housing Trust and the low income investment fund, about exactly this issue, that in particular now, when the market is relatively weaker than it was before the beginning of the pandemic, at this low point in the cycle, we might observe a larger number of opportunistic investors coming in, acquiring assets with an eye to repositioning them. How do you get ahead of that cycle?
Well, we have a number of structural advantages. One is that we have partnered with large institutional investors and family offices and impact investors who've shared their capital with us. So that's important. But we buy properties in partnership with our nonprofit owner operators who are investors in our platform, but are also the entities who partner with us on individual real estate transactions. And so they know their communities better than anyone. They've been serving these communities and serving people of modest means for 40, 50, 60 years. So they know their markets, they know their submarkets, they know all the local government programs that offer some light subsidy and support. And local owners and local government know them and know that they are responsible owners, good real estate owners, people you want as your neighbor. And so when we can be competitive on the bid, we often have an extra thumb on the scales because of who we are and who our partners are.
Right. So when you're making your pitch to the investor, someone who may be thinking about taking on some multifamily exposure, the first thing that occurs to them is market rate multifamily. Are you able to talk about a competitive your return on their investment, or is it also important that there's someone who cares about the social return on the investment that they're making?
Both. We have investors who are truly just returns driven. We look for our common equity to deliver about an 8 to 10% return over an 8 to 12-year hold period. We're not a get rich quick program, but in a diversified investment portfolio, this asset is stunningly reliable. There are more people who need this housing than there is available housing. So the demand for this housing is enormous. And if you invest with us, because we have deep expertise in effectively managing housing that serves this population, we know how to squeeze the nickel and deliver good housing and good returns. So if you have a layered investment portfolio and you want something that is, you're moving from your government bonds at the farthest, treasury bills, all the way up to your highly speculative breakout tech investment, we're somewhere around core, a good place. However, most people who invest with us do also care about impact, because they know that if you're going to have a vital, healthy city, if you're going to have vital, healthy businesses in your city, you're going to have a diverse population. And let me take a minute to talk about that, because the people we serve, our portfolio is affordable at about 55% of area median income. So who is that? Those are the essential workers that all of us are desperately relying on today. We're talking delivery truck drivers. We're talking about home health care aides, certified nurse assistants, the lab techs in the hospital, the child care workers, everybody you need to have a healthy economy in that market segment lives in our apartments. We also have a lot of people who work in retail and work in the restaurant business, and they've been suffering. But the population we serve is absolutely critical to the vital neighborhoods that we all enjoy.
Yeah, and from an academic perspective, some of our research at the Urban Lab at NYU also focuses on this issue of the importance of occupational diversity, as you described, that in the absence of occupational diversity, there are a set of key functions within the city that we're not able to support. And that has an impact on the long-term economic trajectory of the city and the surrounding area as well. And as a bottom line, sometimes the way I'll describe it is that it's impactful to outcomes if teachers, firemen, and policemen cannot afford to live in the communities that they ultimately serve. It's so great to hear about this work. Just to get, since so many of the folks who tune in for the program, so many of our students have historically been focused on that Class A institutional segment of the market, whether it be office buildings or luxury apartment towers. Is it possible to talk about what the typical asset looks like in the portfolio? Is it just outside the urban core? I know you described some of the important amenities like schools and access to transportation, not being sort of in a food insecure location. What does the asset look like?
It is your classic 1980s garden apartment. When it was built in 1980, it was cool. It had tennis courts, it had a swimming pool, it had a clubhouse. It was a little outside town. It was, the far suburbs at that point. And today it's virtually in a ring suburb. The, communities have overtaken it, but it's no longer the glamorous housing. It's really meat and potatoes, basic housing, low rise, 2 or 3 stories, 4 apartments around a single stairway. And when we invest, what we find is it's generally become quite tired. The existing owner operators have lost steam. When we survey the residents and ask what they need and what they want, what they say is they need their trouble tickets fixed. They need an owner who will make all the repairs that are needed in a timely fashion instead of the hot water being out for 6 weeks or the continuing leak from the apartment upstairs. So we go in and we make investments first to make the buildings healthy, second to green them up. These are older buildings, so there's an opportunity to have an enormous immediate environmental impact improvement with very simple changes. We're able to reduce water leakage tremendously. We're able to reduce electric and energy and heat and air leakage immediately because you change out the windows, you redo the roofs, you enhance the plumbing fixtures. You change out all those regular light bulbs for LEDs. I mean, it's shocking how much of an immediate impact you can have on your carbon footprint and reduce the cost of running the building. So we do that. And we also look at what amenities make sense for the people we serve. A very common thing to do is to take that tennis court, which at this point is broken. It's lost its net. No one was playing on it except to use it as an inadequate sport court. And either you turn it into a real sport court and put up basketball hoops and redo the tarmac, or you take it out and you put in a dog park with a tot lot beside it and benches. And then it becomes the new community center where everybody gathers to say hello. So it's that focus on who we're going to serve and how to do it effectively that's really our secret sauce.
Yeah, and you're not making these decisions in isolation. As you mentioned, you've got folks as part of the team that are engaged with and involved with the community to hear, what are the needs? What are the kinds of amenities we can provide? Now, you did mention that, you're the renter base. In leafing through your 2019 annual report on your website, I saw that as you mentioned, the average apartment rent is about 55 to 57% of area median income. The occupations you described include everyone from teachers to folks that are working in retail or restaurant, sectors that have been most dramatically impacted by the pandemic. How are your tenants doing, and how is that reflected in the performance of the portfolio?
Well, when this first started, I spoke to my board and I spoke to all my partners, and I thought it's all going to be about surviving, stabilizing, and then thriving, right? How do we survive through this? And we immediately focused on what do you need to do to lock down expenses? What things can you defer? The wish list items that you were thinking about, were you going to put in a new community center? Not this year. Were you going to completely overhaul the landscape? Not this year. But are you going to invest in keeping everything super clean and putting in electronic access so there's less human contact? Yes. So we immediately did that, preparing for our residents to be hit hard. And frankly, I thought they'd be hit hard by March. I thought it'd be immediate. It turns out that universal income replacement works. Who knew? And so the stimulus, the CARES Act money, the additional unemployment comp really made a difference for the people we serve. And of course, a lot of people were still working. So our rent attainment has been actually quite good. What we've seen is people pay later in the month, but they get there. So we've had a little decline in residents' ability to pay their rent, and our partners have worked very closely with households who needed help in applying for benefits, who needed a payment plan. But in general, we've stayed about on track with where the NMHC tracker has said the apartment industry has been.
No, that's great to hear. Now, to your point about the enhanced unemployment benefits and other provisions of the CARES Act, one of the things that we've been concerned about in trying to track closely is whether or not there was clear evidence of a deterioration in renter security once all of those benefits expired. What's your sense? The next couple of months, it doesn't look like at this point we're going to see a significant new intervention in support of unemployed Americans. When we do look at the improvements in the labor market, your residents are amongst the cohorts that have struggled to come back, right? So if it's folks that are in the low to medium income ranges that are not seeing the most robust jobs market recovery, what happens in the next couple of months?
I think it's going to be very, very tough for the people we serve. Again, it bifurcates. So they're the people who are doing jobs where they're experiencing more hours. If you're a local delivery truck driver, you're probably working more than you ever have. If you are a home health care aide, your work never fell off. If you're a restaurant worker, it's been awful. So there's been some talk about the K-shaped recovery. And I think for the people we serve, there's also that K-shape. There are people who are working more than they ever have, but having to juggle more because their kids don't have school and they don't have the full support they need. And then there are those for whom it's going to be really, really tough. That's one area where our approach to not have our properties be over levered is useful, and where our partners' abilities to help residents again navigate the benefit system, get assistance where they can, access both public and philanthropic dollars has been useful, but it's going to be tough, and we've certainly seen a little decline in this last month.
Yeah, one of the things that you've just mentioned, I'd ask folks to keep in mind when we're talking about getting back to work. Most of us on the call are in a very luxurious position and having a fair degree of flexibility. One of the things that we're tracking in the data is a disproportionate weight of childcare responsibilities falling on women heads of household, and that impinging upon their re-engagement in the labor force, particularly in cases where your children at home may not be going back to school during the day. It's just made it so difficult for folks that don't have alternative childcare options to actually get back in there. On that point, one of the things that we've spoken with the big office REIT CEOs about has been this question of return to work versus working from home or working remotely. And it's been, for many of us, sort of framed in terms of what does that mean for office space? But talk to us about what, and this comes back to the poll that we had at the beginning of the session. From your perspective, what does it mean for the kinds of spaces and the kinds of amenities, the kind of properties that folks will be looking for?
So, what we do is so different from the Class A, right? If you invest in Class A apartment buildings, you're in a relentless amenities arms race. You can never have enough in the way of amenities. And you're always, oh, where's the dog washing facility? Oh, where's the high-end gym? Oh, where's the gallery space? And people in Class A are renters by choice, not by necessity. People in Class B and C are renters by necessity in general. Whether they're going to be renters for life or whether or not they're going to be using this as a springboard to save and move to home ownership. Either way, the people we serve don't have a lot of optionality. So our units stay full, and we've seen no decline in occupancy, unlike what you've seen in the higher ends. But what you have seen is the amenity needs are different. So a lot of our residents used to rely on the business center in the clubhouse, where there are always a lot of computers and there's great internet, and they use that for their kids' homework needs. Well, now you need internet all the way into your own unit. And if you're a family of modest means, internet can cost you from $25 to $100 or more a month in your unit. That's very expensive. So a number of our partners have been working, and of course, internet's a regulated utility, so it's different in every place. But our partners have been working very closely with local jurisdictions and local providers to try to bridge that last several feet to provide internet into people's homes, because that's going to be in the future like having electricity. It's not going to be optional. It used to be optional having great internet bandwidth in your apartment. No more optional.
The digital divide has never been more apparent in terms of driving differences in outcomes for folks. If you don't have solid internet connection, it's disenfranchising over the course of the pandemic in terms of your ability to participate, as a member of society. Both for folks' ability to work, but also their kids who may be going to school online. What kinds of other things have you done? Getting internet access where you can into people's units. Obviously, you don't want them congregating in the business centers under current circumstances. What other kinds of investments or changes have you made during the pandemic?
Sure. And I can divide it between what we at the REIT level have made in terms of focusing on our portfolio writ large, and then what's happened at the individual units. So at the individual property level, our managing member nonprofit partners really did quickly pivot from wish list items to essential items, and they surveyed their residents and have continued to survey residents to say, where are you now? What do you need? What is happening in your life? And so at that level, there's been an ongoing engagement with residents to meet their needs. And sometimes that has meant again, partnering to get internet. It has meant bringing in access to food support for households who never needed that before. It's been providing that additional support to access the public benefit system. That's been, we found that property staff is serving as online coaches, counselors, almost social workers. And because the on-site property management teams are generally employees of our nonprofit partners, this is a developed expertise they've always had. They've just been deploying it a lot more now. At the REIT level, we're a team of national real estate experts. And the one thing that happens when you're in real estate, particularly in the apartment business, is you've been through a lot of cycles, and you've been through some awful cycles. Whether it was the S&L collapse, whether it was having big investments in the Gulf Coast after Katrina, whether it was the 2008 cycle. I mean, the apartment business is volatile. And while each up and down is different, you learn things pretty quickly about focusing on fundamentals, making sure that you can manage your debt service effectively, and retreating to your core, keeping these properties safe, healthy, and economically viable. And so that's been our divide, knowing our partners are dealing on the ground, with residents and knowing that we're managing the portfolio writ large.
I want to come back in a moment to Katrina, which you mentioned, and some of the lessons learned. But before we do that, maybe since you were talking about sort of what you're doing at the level of the REIT, how has your team adapted? You've got folks in the properties that have been leveraging this skill set and be working in an operational capacity with tenants that is sort of over and above what we would think of as the role of a property manager in a market rate asset. Has your team been going back into the office? How are folks doing?
Well, our national team is not in the office. We went remote on March 13th and haven't been back. And I don't anticipate being back before next summer. And I've been stunned at how well it's worked. We had invested a lot in thinking through our governance and our cyber discipline and our sort of virtual infrastructure before this happened. So when we went out, we really haven't missed a beat. It is, and you found that, as you were saying for your program, the opportunities you have virtually that you couldn't have otherwise to engage. And then there are, I have to tell you, my finance people love it. It's harder for people to come and interrupt them when they're really deep into a really interesting bit of analysis. They can ignore me when I'm calling them, which they couldn't when I walked into their office. My dirt guys, it's harder because they need to touch and feel and walk properties. And so they've been doing more stuff virtually, literally, working with people on the ground to zoom them around to properties. So I'm impressed at how well it's worked.
Would you anticipate that long term? So imagine a scenario where next summer we've got a vaccine that is both highly effective but widely adopted. I think for me that those are sort of the preconditions to some kind of normalization of the way in which we interact with one another. If those two things are in place, do you imagine returning to a pre-pandemic sort of set of behaviors in terms of how you use the office, how you come together? Or has the surprise of how effective we've been able to be during this period, is it going to inform your thinking about remote work flexibility?
Have always offered, as a manager and a business executive, I've always offered my teams enormous amounts of where and how they work flexibility. And part of that is, I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids. Now they're grown up. They're not in the house anymore. But part of that experience drives your own discipline about, that ever critical tenant night to 2 in the morning slot to do documents when the children are 3. I nailed that one. So, I've always offered my teams a lot of flexibility, and that won't change. But I do think something magic happens when you are together physically. When you go to a conference, it's often not the lecture, because we can recreate that right here. It's that sidebar conversation with somebody about something not directly on point, but relevant, that starts you thinking. And then 6 months later, you're working on something else and you think, I'm going to call Craig because he was doing this, and I think we could do it together, right? That's hard to recreate virtually, all those connections that create magic. So will I be less lockstep about being physically places as I used to be? Yes, but I will also make sure we do have those opportunities for people to come together.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the Katrina experience and lessons learned in a moment. Before I do that, since you mentioned debt service cover, have you had to go back to the debt market at all since the beginnings of the pandemic? How's access to credit changed? How are is there more due diligence being done by lenders? What's that experience been like?
You know, we haven't had to. We did the minute the pandemic started. Yeah, I mean, I'm a former Fannie Mae executive, so of course we
Yes, you
called
are.
all our lenders. We looked at
Yeah,
our debt. We, you know, but and our preferred equity. We called everybody, and
yeah,
said, just want to let you know where we are. And we have been over communicating and oversharing every step of the way with both our straight debt providers and our preferred equity providers, but we haven't found that we needed to change anything. We were well positioned coming into this. And both our debt and equity providers said they would, you know, were interested in discussing flexibility if we found we needed it, but we haven't found we needed it. And they may at this point wish I would quit sharing so much with them, but since right now past performance is no indicator of future, right? I mean, we don't know the shape this pandemic will take. And so I actually think my debt and preferred equity providers appreciate knowing that here's where we are, here's where we are, here's where we are, so that as things move up and down, and I do think we'll see some bumpiness, they've got the data in front of them.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. I wanted to leverage your experience as part of the leadership team at Fannie Mae, since there are folks on the call who invariably will be in the multifamily sector, but will not have had that experience leading the other side of it as well. So folks, reach out to your lender, over communicate. It sounds like you're hearing it from from Anne Segrest McCulloch. So talk to me about Katrina. What are some of the lessons learned in scenarios where you've been in the market? As you said, we've been through cycles together,
Yeah.
but you've also been in situations where a market or the country has had to grapple with a significant external shock. In those types of situations, how do we make sure that there's still credit, whether or not it's backstopped by the government, and that it's actually getting to the folks that are most significantly in need? Very often in situations like this, the folks that still have access to the credit are the ones who don't need it.
Yep. Katrina was an amazing situation. I myself had gone to college and law school in New Orleans, but had been in DC for years, not working in Louisiana. And when Katrina came through, I was a Fannie Mae executive, and Fannie Mae had the largest total exposure along the Gulf Coast, both debt and equity. Enormous, enormous exposure. And not only did it have a huge book of investments, like everybody else, they were literally in the middle of closing deals, right? Every home that had traded, that had a home loan that had closed the day before the storm or was supposed to close the next day, every apartment loan that was in the middle of refinancing. You had to make decisions without having complete knowledge. And you had to keep making decisions and keep moving, knowing you didn't know what you didn't know. The obvious examples were, did you take delivery of mortgages when you didn't know if the house was still there? The loan had closed on whatever, Thursday, and the mortgage was going to deliver on Monday. And, did Fannie Mae strand the lender? And the answer was no. We decided we'll keep going. We'll keep driving liquidity into the communities. And if it turns out that the apartment building isn't there, the house isn't there, the whatever, we'll fix that after the fact. But if you stop the flow of capital, everything seizes up, right? We found that we did things you never would have expected to do. Literally, we sent in teams to help everyone with their insurance claims. We sent in teams to help people with every element of their life. Whether it was the president of the local bank who had his whole building flooded out and had his whole computer systems flooded out, and almost had no way to run his business, or whether it was the resident of a single family home or a small apartment complex. For about 2 years, we sent in teams week after week after week to do everything you could imagine to help local owner-operators, local lenders, and local governments keep going with an eye towards keeping the flow of capital moving. And there were moments where you thought, man, is this throwing good money after bad? I mean, will we be able to recover these investments? Will we be able to recover our existing? The end result was that after within 3 years of the crisis, Fannie Mae had reduced its total loss exposure by about 95% because of continuing to drive liquidity into that market while the market continued to recover.
So it's not just altruism, it's good business.
It was great business, but there were days when it felt like a hard decision to make, except if you happen to be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where, you know, they are government-sponsored enterprises who have only 3 functions: to drive liquidity, stability, and affordability to the U.S. mortgage markets. And if they can't and don't deliver under truly catastrophic circumstances, there's an open question as to why we should be invested, you know, as a country in them. But they have delivered.
And it's great to hear. I think sometimes, you know, we fall back into a situation where we think of the agencies as simply being sort of facilitators of a secondary market. And to hear from someone who sort of is, you know, deeply involved with the work of Fannie Mae about all of these other things that, you know, Fannie did to support the community. You know, not just providing capital, but ultimately helping to sustain and stabilize that community is just a really important takeaway, I think, for me and everyone else. We do have a whole bunch of questions that we want to get to. I'll ask Scott to jump back in. There you are, sir. Go ahead, Scott. What do folks want to hear about?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Really good conversation. I appreciated your comments about trying to expand broadband services to your residents. There's obviously been a lot more interest and depth and breadth to the ESG space in general. So I'm curious about other partnerships that you're looking at within the social purpose, social infrastructure space, you know, whether it's healthcare or education or job training. Are there other things partnerships you're looking at there?
Sure. And there are a number, both the partnerships that we do directly and the ones that our partners, our nonprofit managing members do at our properties. A number of our partners have partnered directly with major local health systems, whether it's United Healthcare or Kaiser or whoever the local mega provider is, because there's no question that if you can deliver healthcare and into this population at a more affordable rate, and a lot of that is telehealth, right? Providing the ability to deliver telehealth into someone's home, if you're a health provider, you lower your cost of operating and you increase the health of your partners. A number of our nonprofit partners have partnered with, again, local broadband providers, a number of the local, not so much this year, but community supported agriculture and small farmers markets.
Yep.
And have found that that's been a real value add. One of the things that have been focused on and looking towards, but haven't closed the loop on, is building partnerships with local career and technical education providers, the local community colleges, who are already experts at delivering educational services to adult learners, and often in a remote environment. Because a number of the people that we serve are people whose economic trajectory can be changed by gaining education certificates that give them technical qualifications to move up the job ladder. So that's been on our, frankly, in February, that was towards the top of my list. It's been further down on the list this year. but hope to bring it back up to the top of the list for next year.
We've got a couple of our common friends. It's so nice to see some familiar names in the Q&A list. One of the questions that's coming up is, what is your exit strategy, or how do you exit from that 1980s garden apartment, and if you do exit? So let's start with that one.
Sure, we are a long-term hold strategy. Let me be clear. We are not buying and flipping houses, but we have sold properties. Generally, we look for an 8 to 12 year hold for every property, but one of our first early investments wound up being we bought and then sold it back to our partner for tax credit syndication, because once we stabilized the property, they had the opportunity to do a successful tax credit syndication and get a full Section 8 contract on it. We just sold at the end of last year our first investment. We had added use restrictions to the property. It had been, it was in Chicago, and it had been the bad neighbor. You know, that building that you avoided, the owners didn't fully have site control, bad actors in the neighborhood cut through the property, investments hadn't been made. So we had bought it, really stabilized the property and made it a healthier, stronger property, put use restrictions on it, and sold it in December of last year for about a 9.5% return for us, and I think north of 12 for our partner, with use restrictions in place. So it'll continue to be affordable for a while to come, and we were able to make a healthy return. So each property's its individual business plan. There's not a one size fits all for all of them, but that's what we're generally looking at.
Scott?
Yeah, the use of the REIT structure in the affordable and workforce housing space is fairly rare. It's not uncommon. What are some of the benefits of that structure for you and your business? Do you see more affordable housing groups turning to the REIT structure?
Sure. The thing that I like about it is that a REIT is designed as a perpetual capital vehicle, right? Its intention is to be an ongoing platform. And one of the things about raising equity capital that doesn't have fixed duration is you're not forced to liquidate your portfolio in year 3, year 5, year 7. Because I've often found that when I financed, closed-end funds that were going to have everything sold or recapitalized in year 10, that year 10 just turned out to be a great year for workouts, because you weren't able to achieve your optimistic plans, because sometimes the real estate cycle doesn't align with your structured plan. So if you don't have to recapitalize the whole portfolio by a hard deadline, that works better, I think, for affordable housing. But you have to be realistic, and ultimately capital drives your decisions. And so, some investors only want a fixed duration fund, and some are more open to the open-ended structure of the REIT.
Got it. As a follow-up, sorry, Sam, you're non-listed now. Obviously, if you were listed, there could be a lot more volatility, but you'd also open up yourself to more retail and individual investors. Any thoughts on affordable housing REITs like yourself accessing the public markets? Sure.
And I can tell you that our founders envisioned going public. That was part of their original business plan, and still is on, I think, all of our founder investors' list of ultimate. As a former public company executive, I'm not sure I love the public markets quite as much as others might. It's a very hard way to earn a living, particularly when you are focused on a mission business, where you are very focused on not expanding rents as much as possible and delivering a good return, but not a juiced return. But all the things that we do to continue to enhance the health of our platform from a mission perspective would support going public at some point. So I don't say never. It's not at the top of my must-do list.
I think we have time for one more. Folks are interested in hearing a little bit more about the JV structures with your partners? And is there a typical set of control rights that you're thinking about? How does it work? Sure.
When we buy a property, we, a typical deal, we put 20% equity in. That 20% equity is about 85% us, 15% our nonprofit partner. The nonprofit partner becomes the managing member. We have major decision rights. So from an accounting perspective, we have shared control. But the day-to-day control of the real estate is with our nonprofit partners.
Got it. Well, we are just about out of time. Thank you, Anne, so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And the work you're doing and your team, just incredible and inspiring. So thank you again. Hope to see you again very, very soon, and hopefully next time in person.
Thank you. This was great. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Remember Thursday's Capital Markets Leadership Series with Square Mile Capital. And then next week, our 53rd annual conference on capital markets and real estate. All of those general sessions are complimentary, as well as the affinity group meetings. So please join us there, and we hope to see you. Thanks.